Welcome, my dear friends. It's very to see you. In case we haven't been introduced before, I'm Stephen Clements, a writer, a gamer, and an appreciator of big brain activities in general. On this channel, I perform dramatic story readings, I provide role-playing game and movie reviews, and I get to talk to interesting people. In this episode, we're reviewing one of my favorite role-playing games ever written, On Guard. You may be asking, Stephen, my dear friend, what is On Guard? Get ready for a game the likes of which you've probably never seen. On Guard is a game about social climbing in Three Musketeers era Paris, France, which was in the center of power and high culture, and a standard setter for fashion, societal games, masculine peacocking, and feminine allure. To climb that social ladder, you're going to have to be seen at all the best clubs, bed the finest mistresses, gamble big and come out on top, or look like a schmuck in front of everybody. You're gonna have to win duels for honor with rivals, buy your way into the most prestigious military ranks and regiments, so when you go to win glory at war and grab loot and possible battlefield promotions at the same time, you'll be maximizing your chances of getting all the good things while avoiding a cannonball to the face. Death comes at you fast in On Guard, and honestly, I've never seen grown men so engrossed with basic math and event planning schedules as I have in this game. A DM-less system, the game is run by the players using a set of charts. Players decide what they want to do, conspire with or against each other, role-playing as much or as little as they want, rolling d6s, and living or dying by the results of the dice and what the charts say. And there's no DM who can step in and save you if you roll bad in this game. There's no saving throws, just charts, rules, and your honor, and the honor of the group around you, to make sure you abide by what the charts say. And you have a character, they were born to the finest family. They got more starting money than they know what to do with. The first time they show up, they can land the hottest, most prestigious whore in Paris, walk right into the king's own regiment, bribe their way up the officers' ranks, and when it comes to battle, a cannonball to the face, it'll hit him just as hard as it'll hit a peasant. If the charts say you're dead, you're dead. No takebacks. No re-rolls. It's just you and your new character sheet. So if you are or have a player who gets really tore up when their precious player character dies in a game and they're so afraid of it, run them through some On Guard. That'll toughen them up real quick. Or they'll rage quit gaming. Either way, your problem will be solved. So never having heard of it before, I got hooked on Guard when I played in a session of it ran by Stephen Winter, of whom I'm quite the fan, at GaryCon 2019. It was my first con. I respect the crap out of Steve Winter as a game designer and editor, so I wanted to find a game session to play with him. He was offering what looked like an interesting enough gaming experience. I had never seen or heard of it before, so I gave it a whirl. Winter told us he's been playing On Guard since the late 70s, still plays it when he gets the chance, and he wanted to show it off to a group of 10 people that thought it sounded like a good time. And as we go through this review of the game, some of the ideas, tactics, techniques, and items that Steve Winter used in that game, because I think they add a lot of value to the game, and so he's going to come up quite a bit. And no lie, that con game kind of changed my life a little bit, because Winter introduced me to a game I had no idea I needed in my life. A game that centered on some of my most primal passions, like the pursuit of classy yet slutty women. The idea that you can raise your social level by drinking gratuitous amounts in public. Sword fighting, which I've done myself. Pursuing military glory and showboating like your life depends on it. It's a game chock full of machismo and incentivizes risk-taking because in the game, as in life, no risk, no reward. For the sensitive souls out there, this game has sexism, racism, and infidelity, and all kinds of spicy stuff baked into it, just like the setting it was meant to represent. And don't get too upset, because every single place in the world at the time that this game is set was like that, and as a matter of fact, pretty much every place in the world nowadays is just as bad. They just might cover it up in different ways, or direct the animosity towards different groups of people than in this setting, but everybody does it. And much like one of my other favorite games, Inner City, which I previously reviewed on this channel, this game is about as far from being politically correct as possible. If that bothers you, why are you watching this channel? Because I'm all those things. But unlike my channel, if you're still interested in trying out the game, all it takes is a word change or two, and bam, you're done. Now the game, its language and concepts are universally accessible to whatever particular flavor of preferences you have. But to get in the mood for the game, I recommend Disney's The Three Musketeers movie and the silent film The Iron Mask with Douglas Fairbanks, both of which are amazing tales of swashbuckling adventure. So Steve Winter, thanks for running that game. It inspired me, and I showed it to others and hooked them too. Now I run it at cons, my friends run it at cons, and we try to rope more people into the game. Now enough of my gushing. Let's look at how the game sells itself on the back of the one book that constitutes the entire product line. On Garde, being in the main a game of the life and times of a gentleman adventurer and his several companions. On Garde is the cry. Draw your sword and stand alongside D'Artagnan, Cyrano de Bergerac, and Errol Flynn, or join Flashman in the bar. In On Garde, you get to carouse in the clubs of Paris, charm the ladies, serve the king or queen, and trounce your enemies. On Garde is a swashbuckling game set in a fictional 17th century Paris. All you need to play are a bunch of friends, these rules, pen and paper, and a few dice. First published in 1975, On Garde has been popular ever since. This new edition has been reorganized but remains faithful to the original. So sharpen your sword, sharpen your wit, take care not to insult a small man with a large nose. All for one, and one for all! Good luck, friend, and may your swash never buckle! Moving to the credits pages, we see this game was originally made by American games company Games Designers Workshop, or GDW, which was founded in 1973, right about the same time as original D&D publisher TSR. Not only did the companies begin at almost the same time, On Garde came out only 1 year after D&D, making it one of the oldest role-playing games ever made. And to be clear, GDW was not the same company as Games Workshop of Warhammer fame, who ties their players' game experience to how much money they spend on product. GDW consistently won awards over decades and created celebrated classics like Traveler, Twilight 2000, and more obscure titles like Cadillacs and Dinosaurs, Dark Conspiracy, and Dangerous Journeys with Gary Gygax. The original On Garde team included Frank Chadwick, John Harshman, Lauren Wiseman, and Daryl Hanney. While not the original designer, these days it is longtime On Garde fan and now owner of the game, Paul Evans, that publishes it. Paul is still very much an active gamer, with his website showing endless proofs of him being involved. The man publishes a zine, continues to run online play-by-mail games, loves LARPing, posts regular game reviews, and more. You can join his online On Garde game right now, and every few months he resolves everyone's actions and sends updates. Apparently, he often gets confused for other Paul Evanses and has created an international list to disambiguate them, because apparently that was needed. In its 4th edition, this is the same game as the original publication, and I've seen people play with different versions of the book at the same table with no problem. The only differences have been content, layout, and a tad bit of cleanup here and there. So if you buy the original pamphlet version, you have all the rules you need. Art-wise, it's serviceable, if not great. This cover has issues in that I think it's a bit dark, a little muddled and lacking in detail in some places and being repetitive in others. Like these guys got a lot of character in their faces, but they're a little too similar to be interesting. And then her, poor thing, you can like a balloon with a couple things squiggled on it. But the cover gets across the womanizing, bellicose spirit of clashing egos that are central to the game, so it works. Inside, we get several fun, little jaunty, cartoonish illustrations to add flavor here or there, all in pencil sketch format, and they're nice little diversions. In reviewing the game, it's going to be more useful for me to explain it by walking you through the character sheet instead of going chapter by chapter through the book, because the character sheet really does boil down the essentials you need in order to play this game. This isn't like Dungeons and Dragons and some other game systems where the character sheet has all kinds of fields to enter information, and you might even forget what you wrote in certain parts because you never need to go look at them. Well, in every single turn that you play On Garde, I can almost guarantee you're going to need every part of this character sheet. On this one-page sheet, there is no wasted space here. Now, one point I'll raise about the character sheet is that while the character sheet in the book does work, I think the version that Steve Winter used at that GaryCon game was superior in its layout and utility. So I use that, and if you want a copy of it, just send me a message. So in the On Garde character record, starting up in the top left, these are the boxes that you mostly roll for and that are going to help determine the fate of your character as you start the game. The character field, that's for your character's name, and an obvious go-to is to make it something French, but feel free to bring in adventurers from any country that you want. I've noticed that my Scottish characters don't do well, but my Spaniards they do mighty fine. And then you put your player name. Then we come to the 3 ability scores that you're going to roll for. You're going to take 3d6 and go in order. Expertise, that measures your ability with a blade. And when it comes to dueling, this is critically important. Constitution is exactly what it says. And in the rules as written, it doesn't have any use besides being a multiplying factor to get your endurance. Strength represents how hard you hit with a blade when you do hit with the blade. So if expertise helps determine if you hit or not, strength determines how much damage you're going to do. Endurance, that represents the hit points you have in this game, the number of times you could take damage before you die. And when you hit 0, you're done for. Now that's only in a duel. If you're off at war and things don't go your way, it doesn't matter what your endurance is. Getting mowed down by a line of musketmen doesn't matter if you're tough as an ox or weak as a wimp. 20 slugs will do it. And to get endurance, you take your constitution, multiply it by your strength, and there you go. Military ability. Military ability is important because at some point, in order to move up in the social world, you're going to need to move up in military ranks and command soldiers in order to move ahead. For this, you roll a single d6, with the higher the better. And in some of the modifications me and my friends have done to these rules, we use that as a stand-in for intelligence and leadership ability. So we have something to roll against. So those are all the abilities that you roll for straight up. There's no charts involved. Now beneath there, you see a box for title. Well, we're going to take a look at how you would get a title starting off. You can always earn one later, but is it possible to start with one? Going to the column to the right, we see at the top social level. Now, social level is effectively your character level. It is your place in the hierarchy of Paris, France at the time. With the higher, the better. Now, you might start off really low on the social level, like a 1 or a 2 social level. And it's possible you could start off at a 10 or 11, something like that, if the dice work out that way. But more than likely, you're going to be 6 or below, which is not where you want to be because there's some clubs that won't even let you in unless you're a certain social level. There's some military regiments, the best ones, you can't even join. You can't even volunteer to be shot for them unless you're of a prestigious tier of the societal scale. And that's going to play more of a factor as we come along. So how do you determine your social level? It has to do with 2 of the 3 boxes below here, father's position and sibling rank. So we're going to pull out our charts and get to rolling. First off, we're going to go with birth table A, class. Using a single d6, we're going to find out if your character was born a commoner, a gentleman, or a nobleman. The commoner is exactly what you think. And then once we have that result, we're going to move to birth table B, sibling rank, to see which rank you were born in the son hierarchy. We're going to roll to see if you were the first son, the second son, or a bastard son of your father. Because if you land first son, well, you get an increase in the amount of money you start with and the amount of money daddy sends you each month to maintain your lifestyle. Oh, and your social level goes up by 1 because you are assumed to be the heir apparent to his fortune and are more prestigious because of it. Now, if you do roll first son, you roll again, and on a roll of a 1, turns out daddy kicked the bucket. So you don't get an allowance each month from daddy, but instead you receive an inheritance. And if your father was a noble, you receive your father's title and increase your initial social level by 3. And should you have rolled up first son of a nobleman and your dad kicked the bucket, you go over the birth table D, father's title, roll a 1d6, and that's the title you get. With the higher, the better. Now, if you were one of the people who rolled a 5 or a 6, like my friend Pat likes to do, well, actually, he doesn't like doing it. It just happens to him a lot. You're a bastard. So you're an illegitimate son of a father of whatever social rank he happens to be. Now, regardless of if you were born a commoner, a gentleman, or a noble, you need to roll on birth table C, father's position. And again, you're going to be rolling a 1d6 to determine within the class you were born to, what's the economic condition of your father. Now, this can get really brutal or excessively easy for your starting position. If you're a commoner, well, there's a good chance you're a peasant. You barely got any money to your name, and dad can't afford to give you anything, whether it's a monthly stipend or an inheritance. You could be a small merchant where you get a little something to start off with. You could be a more standard merchant, a wealthy merchant, or dad could be a better off merchant. And sometimes the amount of money dear daddy can throw at you goes very far indeed. Now, gentlemen, you could be impoverished as well, so don't sneer at the impoverished peasants too quickly. Or you could be well-to-do, wealthy, or very wealthy. Now, nobles, it's kind of a cruel trick if you happen to be the first son of a dead dad and you inherit his title, but you start off impoverished because, well, you're going to be hitting the skids real quick when it comes to social level because you won't be able to maintain appearances to keep up the family social prestige. Or you could be well-to-do, wealthy, or very wealthy. My friend Pat, he likes to roll up a commoner bastard peasant. That seems to happen to him a lot. But the character that I've seen climb the highest in any On Guard game was exactly one of those bastard peasants, Pepe Le Rouge. And so when we got all that put together, we go to the initial social level chart and take a look at what we got. As you can see, our starting range of social levels is 2 of a peasant. But bear in mind, if you're a bastard, that goes down by 1. So you can start at a 1. And it goes all the way up to 11 if your father's a count. But if your father kicked the bucket and you're now the count, then it could be a 14. And because of your social level, you may in and of yourself be influential. So you take a look at influence table A, influence of social level. And if your social level is 8 or higher, you start off with a influence that you can spend on a periodic basis. That helps you influence NPCs to do what you want. And obviously, the higher the level of influence, the more influential it can be. Because influence table B, influence required, shows what influence level you need in order to improve your chances of getting one of the listed officials to make a decision benefiting you or one of your friends. Or going after them, because you can also spend influence to screw over your rivals. So once you have all of that established, you know what your social level is, what your stats are, what your family background is, and how much money, which is called crowns in this setting, you have on hand and how much you need to spend a month. Now, what are you really spending this money on? Well, first you have to maintain yourself, and you do that by spending twice the amount in crowns as your social level. So if your social level is an 8, you need to spend 16 crowns a month just to have a prestigious enough apartment, to have enough manservants and valets, to have enough cleaning ladies and cooks and dining out money for you to look the part. Now, what happens if you don't have that money or you don't want to spend that money? Well, you start losing status points. What are status points? Those are the things you need in order to, 1, maintain your social level, because every month to maintain your social level, you have to earn at least that number of status points. So if you have a social level 8, you have to earn at least 8 status points every month to maintain that. If you want to move up in a social level, you have to earn 3 times the amount of the level you're going to. So if you're a social level 8 and wanting to move up to a social level 9, you would need to earn 27 status points in a single month in order to do it. Things get expensive real quick. And if you don't spend the 2 times your social level in maintenance, then you go down a social level. Because obviously you're not doing well enough to be in the company as good as you thought you were. And they begin to shun you. Now there is a little trick where you can engage in conspicuous consumption, where you spend 3 times your social level every month to net you an additional 1 status point each month. And sometimes 1 point can make all the difference in the world. Well, how do you earn status points? By doing things that involve the rest of that character sheet. And before we go deep into what you do with each part of that character sheet and the kind of decisions you can make, first we have to know, what is the action economy of the game? How many decisions do you get to make in what amount of time? Just like the older editions of Dungeons and Dragons had individual rounds, then when you added them up, turned into a turn. In the second edition, 1 round was equal to 1 minute, and 10 of those equaled 1 turn. On Guard goes week to week with 4 weeks in 1 month. And when you play the game, you don't make decisions week by week by week by week by week by week. No. At the beginning of each month, you have to pick what 4 things you're going to do, 1 thing per week over the course of that month. You have to write them down ahead of time, and you can't change your mind. Now, things could happen to screw over your plans, and things could work out worse than you thought they were going to, but you can't change your mind midstream. And there's a lot of depth and strategy that comes into play with this technique. We'll get to that. But in your first month, there's several things that you're going to want to do. 1, you're going to want to secure female companionship, because if you fail to get female companionship at least once a month, you lose 2 status points because everybody can tell how grumpy you are. So there's 1, we need female companionship. Then you're going to want to start generating status points. And the best ways to do that are joining military regiments and getting a good rank in it, joining gentlemen's clubs, securing the services to you alone of the mistresses in the game, getting military government appointments, gambling, and heroism in wartime. Now, some of those things aren't available in your first turn. Like the appointments will come to later, and you're not even in a military regiment yet, so heroism in war, not really something you're going to be looking at right off the bat. So let's take a look at military career first. One of the most reliable sources for status points every month is being in a military regiment. And the military regiment that you're in determines not only how much do they pay you every month to be there, but how much status you earn from doing so. And there's some regiments, they won't even take your application unless you're a certain social level. So we're looking at Regimental Table A, Application to Regiment, and Regimental Table B, the regiments, to explore this idea. The very first entry, the Royal Foot Guards. Well, if you take a look at the charts, that's the one you want because that gives you the most pay and the most status points every month. However, they won't even talk to you unless you're at least a social level 7. If you're 6 or below, you can't get in, no matter how hard you try. Even if someone were to pull favors for you, they're not interested in your low class ass. And even to get into that regiment, you have to be a social level 7, and on a single D6, you have to roll a 5 or a 6. If you roll either one of those, they let you in. If you roll anything else, sorry, too bad, so sad. You can't come in. And so right off the bat, you're seeing where social level is important because certain jobs and opportunities just aren't open to you. Now, what kind of regiments do we have here? Well, there's the King's Royal Foot Guards, the Cardinal's Guard, the King's Musketeers, several cavalry regiments such as the Dragoons Guards, the Queen's Own, Archduke Leopold's, the Crown Prince's Cuirassiers, Grand Duke Max's, and Princess Louisa's. Joining these requires you to buy a horse and a groom, and the horse costs a lot of money up front and then monthly maintenance, as does the groom, but the horse is more expensive than the groom. There's also the Royal Marines, who get the biggest sword in the game, the Picardy Musketeers, the 13th Fusiliers, and a bunch of other jabroni regiments, including the Frontier Regiment. But frankly, the Frontier Regiment will take anybody that shows up. Why? Because you're cannon fodder and they're going to treat you like that. So in addition to it being important in determining how much you get paid every month and how many status points it gets you every month, and it makes differences in a few other ways, such as Regimental Table C, some regiments are friends of one other regiment, but they're sworn enemies of another. So as we can see here, the Royal Foot Guards are friends with the King's Musketeers, but because they're the King's own people, they don't really have any enemies. But the Cardinal's Guard, who has no friends, hates the King's Musketeers. The Dragoon Guards and the Queen's Own Carabiners hate each other, and they have friends outside of the Horse Guards Brigade. And this is important because if members of rival regiments come across each other, they're honor bound to duel. Whereas if members of friendly regiments duel, there's dishonor for both of them. So you get some role-playing depth involved in which regiment that you're in. Also, certain appointments that you can get require you to be a member of a certain regiment, such as the Cardinal's Guard has special positions where you might be privy to sensitive information that, depending on how the dice roll when you find out that information, you might be bribed into keeping quiet, or the Cardinal might decide that you know too much and have you assassinated. Yeah, seriously, that's in there. If you want a chance to bed the Queen, well, you're going to need to be in the King's Foot Guard and get the right appointment for it. It's a risky job, but someone's got to do it. The regimental table makes a big difference when it comes to warfare because the regiment that you join and the rank that you're in make big differences when you do go to war. Taking a look at this personal outcome table modifiers, which we'll cover more later, you get bonuses or penalties to whether you live, die, get mentioned for battlefield acts of heroism, get a field promotion because the guy above you died and now the opening's there, and if you get loot or not. So you can see if you're down at the bottom with the Frontier Regiment, the Gascon Regiment, the lowest social level regiments that you can join, your chances of dying are pretty darn good. Your chances of getting promoted are worse, but since you're on the front line, your chances of getting to pillage the enemy camp or the town that you're attacking, it improves quite a bit. Whereas if you're up at the top in the King's Royal Foot Guards, then your insurance against dying goes up quite a bit. And it might be harder to get promoted, but your chances of getting the choicest pick of loot is pretty good. And we'll come back to the war part later, but I just wanted to point out that the regiment you're in and the rank that you have makes a difference in your survival rate. So for the first month of playing our new character, we're going to want to apply to a military regiment at the end of the month, the 4th week there. Why do I say the 4th week? Well, it's because if you get into a regiment, but you aren't able to immediately bribe your way into a captaincy position, you're going to be stuck at the regiment for additional weeks. Oh, why is that? Well, because if you're a private, moving forward after you join a regiment, 2 weeks out of every month, you have to be there slupping out stables, doing drills and exercises, and stepping and fetch it for your officers. If you buy your way up to subaltern or lieutenant, You have to be there 1 week a month to watch all the privates do that. But if you're able to buy your way into captaincy right off the bat, you never have to show up at all. You just show up when it's time to go to war whenever you feel like it. Because rank has its privileges, which shows up again and again in this game. One of the key things you're going to want to do in that first month of play is pick a week to go to the highest social level club you can get into and join up there. Well, it's going to cost you a few crowns each month to be a member of the club. Being a member of a certain club by itself gives you status points. It gives you opportunities to gamble where you're not going to get jumped for your money afterwards, because there is a place where that can happen. And that you can go carousing. Now, carousing, what is that? That is gamified buying drinks for the house, which nets you status points. Because who doesn't like a guy who buys them a drink? And a neat thing is, if you're a higher social level character than, say, one of the other player characters at the table, if you feel like being generous, you can let that person join you at your club so long as they buy you drinks, and then they get the social rub of being in a better club than they normally can get into and being seen in your company. So they're earning status points by buying you drinks. This is called toadying. Now, it's possible if you're a high enough social level and the person you invite in is way too low to be seen in your company, you'll lose status points for it. But it's possible that you have so many status points you don't care, and you can afford to be seen with this person that you've decided you're going to make, and the other person's going to get status points like mad. But here's a little twist. You remember how you have to set your social schedule ahead of time and then you reveal it week by week and there's no takebacks? One mean thing that you can do in this game is make a plan to allow someone to toady for you at your club, and then when that week comes around, you didn't write that down. You planned to do something else. So not only did you no-show on your buddy probably can't get into the club they went to, is not going to get any status points for that week. And so you burned them in multiple ways. But there's nothing stopping you from doing it. So you're going to want to join a social club. But now we're coming back to the topic of female companionship. Because you're just starting the game, you don't have a mistress yet. You got to go get one. Well, there's a chance that the mistress that you go for turns you down no matter how much you try to buy her favor. Because hoes cost money in this game. They cost money for you even to get in the door, to ask them to be your long-term side piece, because it's assumed that the characters in this game can have wives, kids, families of their own. But no one cares about that. They only care about the prestigious mistress they have on their arm. Why? Because France. Now, I said you might not get a mistress, even after you spend a bunch of money just to get in the door to try it. Well, like with almost everything else in this game, you have to roll for it. And the bigger the social level difference between y'all, that yields different modifiers to your roll. Because if you're a significantly higher social level than her, you basically just have to ask. It's almost impossible to fail. Now, if she's way higher than you, she would really pay off if you landed her, but you could be at quite the penalty in trying to get her. And certain readings of the core material as well as house rules would say that if she's 7 or more social levels higher than you, she's just out of your league. You can't even make the roll. So there is a chance that you're not going to land a mistress even if you go for one in the first month. So what's a guy to do? Well, there's the Bawdy House. The Bawdy House is a club where there is no floor on the social level required to get in. Everybody can come here. And you can gamble there, and you can carouse there, and you can rent a whore there. And the prostitutes are as cheap or as expensive as your social level. So 1 week in that first month, you and probably a buddy are gonna want to schedule a time to go to the Bawdy House, because you go there and you carouse, you might be able to get some toadying in, and you can get female companionship, so you're going to get a little status for carousing, you might get some for toadying, and you're not going to lose 2 status points because you dipped your wick. But the problem with the Bawdy House is when you leave, there's a chance you're going to get jumped. And so a house rule that me and some of my friends have come up with, if you go with a buddy, you won't get jumped because you have backup and you're a harder target. But back to the mistresses. You roll them up 3d6 to see what social level they happen to be. And it's possible for a mistress to be beautiful, in which case she gets you more status points every month because of her legendary beauty. She can be influential because all mistresses can call in favors if they're of a certain social level. But influential mistresses, they've bedded the right guys over their time and can call in even more favors on your behalf. How nice is that? And they might be wealthy. in which case they're in it just for the joy of the game. And you don't actually have to pay to keep them around each month. As a matter of fact, if they're a higher social level than you are, they might send you little gifts and money every month just to treat yourself. So if you manage to land a beautiful, influential, and wealthy mistress, you're on easy street, my friend. But if you don't land a wealthy one, in addition to your monthly support, you're going to have to now start paying for hers, because she got to get her nails did, she got to get her hair done, she got to smell good, she got to look fine, you got to send her roses. Oh, and you start paying that the moment she accepts being your mistress. But mistresses, they can be a fantastic source of status points, especially if you aimed high and landed a woman that was almost out of your league. Now, a fun thing is, if you and another player character show up at the same mistress's parlor in the same week, because you can't both get what you want. They might be French, but they're not that open-minded. That's the Italians. If they're Greek, they just wouldn't have the mistress. They would just... Anyway. But this is a cause for a duel, because both of you came here for the same lady, and only one of you is going to have a chance to get her. Now, you can back down and yield the ground to the other guy, but you're going to lose status points for having done so, because you didn't prove you're a man enough to take the woman that was yours and to keep away rivals. Ooh, it's fun. So between your military career, the club you belong in, and the mistress that you land, those are your most stable sources of status points. Now, it's also possible that you can get a military or government appointment. You might even be able to get knighted, made a noble by the king. And what are these appointments like? The base game gives us quite a few to pick from, but me and my friends, we've added more over the years. And in order to go for an appointment, you have to be the minimum social level, you have to have the rank specified, and you're going to have to roll a dice. Some of them have special requirements, such as being a trooper of the King's Escort or a trooper of the Cardinal's Escort. Well, that means you have to be in the King's Royal Foot Guards or the Cardinal's Guard, respectively. If you're a captain and you want to be a regimental adjutant, the right hand of the commander, your military ability score will influence how easy it is for you to get that job. And we see the number that are allowed to be appointed to that position, who does the appointing, which is important because remember back when we looked at the influence table of what level of influence it took to influence what level of official. If the person who's doing the appointing, you have a favor you can call in and pull influence on them, you can lower the difficulty of the die roll, which is a big deal because some of these die rolls at face value are impossible to do. Because how do you roll a 7 on a d6? You don't. But going for appointments is another one of those spots where people might throw influences against you to try to screw you over from getting the job that you want. I've seen it done. I've done it myself. And this is where that plotting with and against each other really comes into play. And you could come up with all kinds of convoluted schemes of compensation, and I'm going to scratch your back, you're going to scratch my back. And again, you can role play as much or as little as you want in this game. Some of these positions don't really do anything besides confer extra status each month. Some of them do pay, some of them give you influences that you can call in, and some of them get special powers, such as the ability to conduct lawfare against your political rivals, to embezzle money from state funds, to send people to war, and on and on. The Commissioner of Public Safety is a son of a bitch, and you want to make sure that nobody who's not your friend gets in that slot. And if it is your friend, you want to make sure that they really are your friend and on the take. Because if they get bought to turn against you, it's going to be a bad day. Now, your military career, your club, and your mistress, so long as you maintain the position that you've got, you can hold on to them. Appointments, they're only good for 1 year, so then you have to either compete for it again or give it up. And we see to the right, we've got 2 columns where you do some accounting of how many crowns and how many status points that you've accrued in a month. So you can find out how much money you have on hand, how much you've got coming in, how much are you underwater, and how many status points you're racking up. And if you have any chance of moving ahead, if you're going to lose social levels or find the difference, you've got to make up to keep climbing. Now, to get back to war. In this game, as in life, it is a fantastic opportunity to meet an untimely and very unfortunate end, but one you kind of should have expected, or make your name and fortune. So let's talk some more about that. We get a bunch of tables that talk about which units get committed during the summer campaign time, which may or may not include the one you're in, what they're going to be doing on deployment, and what the battle results are that depend on the die roll of the commanders involved. Now, these are not opposed die rolls. You just roll for how your commander did, and then the charts tell you how that played out. And then depending on what battle result you get for the unit you're specifically in, that's when you go to the personal outcome table and apply the modifiers we talked about earlier for your regiment and rank in that regiment. But as written, there's not a guarantee that every summer your regiment's going to go off to battle, and so you might miss out on this stuff. That's why in the game that Steve Winter ran, and the games me and my friends have done, we say every summer, la-di-da-di, everybody, you're going to war somewhere. So we make sure that everybody can get in on the action, whether they want to or not. Now, it's possible for you to go on military deployment any other time of the year as well, but for that, you have to volunteer to do it. You fall beneath the authority of the Frontier Regiment, which is not great for your survivability rate, but if you have something as small as a battalion or all the way up to a division under your command, you can volunteer to go and take your own men with you. And so that's why I really work to get into a battalion command so I can go do that sort of thing on my own recognizance. So I can pump the game for promotion opportunities at the risk of my life, and those are the men beneath me. Because glory is how you move up in the world. Let's assume we're in the Dragoon Brigade. We're a cavalry regiment. And let's look at force deployment table. Roll a d6, and depending on what you roll, tells you what you're going to be doing. S stands for siege, A stands for assault, D stands for defense, and F stands for field ops. Siege is kind of self-explanatory. You are besieging a fortification, a bridge, a town, a city, whatever. And it doesn't matter where it is. It's all theater of the mind. It's abstract. There's no map you're going to be moving minis around on in order to conduct this warfare. Now, assault, that means you're trying to storm a position. You're trying to break some lines. Defense, you're trying to keep somebody from breaking your position and storming your line. And field ops, you're scouting, you're raiding, you're plundering food stores, all that kind of stuff. And this is where military ability really matters, because whoever the commanders are, they're going to be rolling 1d6 to see how well things went for their unit. And if your higher up did bad, it makes your roll worse. And if you're captain or below, you're stuck with the results of the asshole above you rolled. You don't even get a roll to see how your unit did. You only get a roll to see how you personally did. But if you're at the battalion level or above, then you get to have a hand in how did the battle go overall. So let's say you had a military ability of a 3. You're not the brightest from the military academy. And say on a d6 you rolled a 1. That's really bad because a 3 with a die roll of 1 gives you a 6. Well, what does a 6 mean? Well, if you were besieging something, that means your force got scattered by a sortie. If you're assaulting somebody, that means you got crushed. If you were trying to defend against somebody, you fell to the siege. And if you're in field ops, you got crushed by the enemy that you encountered. And that's bad, because then you move over to the personal outcome table, and we'll keep going with, let's say, siege. So our battle result was a 6, because we rolled that 1. So we look at the BR column, go down to 6. The first column there, we see a 7. But at the top, we see a D. What does D mean? Death. It means your chances of death. If you roll that number or higher on 2d6, you're fucking dead. And here's where those regimental personal outcome table modifiers really make a difference. Because if you're in the Royal Foot Guard and get to add 3 to that, no matter how bad the battle went, on a 2d6, 9 or below, you're fine. You've still got most of the chance of surviving. However, if you're in the Frontier Regiment, that 7 became a 6. On a 2d6, rolling a 6 or above, pretty good. You're probably going to die, buddy. But assuming you don't die, move to the next column over. We see an M at the top, and that is meritorious mention, where you did something brave and heroic in the battle, and you were so badass about it, somebody wrote back to Paris with news of your deeds. If you get that, you roll a d6, and whatever the result is, for the next 3 months, you get that many more status points because of your mention. And after 3 months, it burns off to a permanent +1. And if you rack up a bunch of these things, man, that makes all the difference when you're trying to social climb. Because if you're a decorated war hero with a bunch of mentions and you're fresh off campaign, you can move up like that. And even once they burn out, having that reserve of permanent +1s, it's nice. But you got to live first. And moving past mentions, we see P, which means promotion. That's a battlefield promotion. So if we were going with a Siege 6, well, that means our own got destroyed, in which case a lot of people died. And the possibility of you moving up in the regiment's command structure, actually pretty darn good. So on 2d6, if you roll 6 or higher, you got a battlefield promotion. Now, if you got crushed in a Siege 6, your chances of getting loot are non-existent because you lost. They took your stuff. But say it was a successful siege. Well, if on 2d6 you roll a 9 or better, you roll 3d6 and multiply the result by 100. That's how many crowns of loot you took home personally. So you can get paid on campaign. So let's say we got something more middle of the road. It was a inconclusive siege. Let's say siege 3. If we had one guy who is in the Gascon regiment, he's got a -1 to his death roll, no change to his mentions. His promotability is more difficult by 1, but his chances of getting crowns are lower by 2. So on a siege 3, homeboy starts with an 11, gets knocked down by 1 because he's a private in the Gascon regiment, so instead of that 11, he's got a 10 or better. On a 2d6, 10 or better means he's dead. If he doesn't like those odds, he can engage in poltroonery and run away, in which case he gets bonuses to a survival roll, but a bunch of bad things can happen to him, such as being dishonored, where nobody in polite society will have anything to do with him until he goes and spends his time at the frontier regiment to re-earn his good name. But if you took a captain in the Royal Foot Guards, you're looking at a +3 for Royal Foot Guards, +1 for being a captain, so it's a total of +4 to avoid death. You take the same number, which was an 11, you add 4 to it, a 15. So it is impossible for him to die by rolling 2d6, because you can't roll higher than a 12 on 2d6. And homeboy's got a 15. And one of the other funny things about that privilege of rank we mentioned is that that captain could engage in acts of reckless bravery and burn off points of his death roll. And for every point he burns off, that makes it easier for him to get a mention, a promotion, or crowns by 1 point. So say he burns off 2 points, takes him down to a 13. You might say, Stephen, my dear friend, there's no chance of him dying on 2d6 if he's sitting at a 13, but he's going to get all these benefits? How is that fair? It's not. He's got no chance of dying, but because of his rank and privilege, he's got a better chance of getting all the good stuff. That's how it be sometimes. And just to add to the theater of the mind aspect of the game, me and my friends came up with this theater deployment table, so when your unit does deploy somewhere, you roll a d6 and it tells you which country you're going to war in. Maybe as an ally, maybe as an invader, but it gives you just a little something extra to add to the storytelling aspect of the game. You can fight Germany, the Dutch, Spain, Italy, England, or go on crusade in North Africa. You got options. An additional item I came up with for this game was basically I used a spreadsheet to make a monthly tracker where it's easier to keep notes on which month you're in, what you're doing each week, what's the SP value of that activity each week, how many crowns did it cost or did you earn in that activity, a field for anything else that wasn't captured, and monthly totals to keep your math basically in one spot. I find this thing very helpful. And as you can see, the character sheet from the book does have some fields for this kind of thing, but it's very limited in what happens when you run out of that space. Do you have to erase it all and so you lose the record of what you did that month? Or do you have to come up with a whole new character sheet each time? I found that inelegant, but using these two sheets in combination, I find to be very helpful. One of the other things that we house ruled is picking the month in which the king is going to grant titles and that you can go for them. If you've done the qualifying events to be considered, you go, there's certain modifiers that may apply, you make the die roll, and if you do it, then you get granted the title of knight. If you don't, well, better luck next time. And next time it will be an easier roll, but you get nothing for now. If you're already a knight and you want to move up the social ladder, well, you can go for higher titles. And when you land noble titles, you start generating status points just for existing. And if it's baron or above, you get a pension from the state to help keep you loyal. So as you can tell, noble titles are a nice thing to have. Guaranteed status points and guaranteed income. Another shortcoming I want to address is the game doesn't come with a map. While it's fine to do a completely theater of the mind role-playing game, given that there are locations that you can go to, and if you happen to show up there at the same time as someone else can trigger a conflict, I think it would be helpful to have a map so you can know who's where when they're showing up. Another credit to Steve Winter and that GaryCon game that he ran. He had a map. It's very basic. It's just enough to give people a place to place their tokens when it comes time for revealing what you're doing in a given week, but I found it incredibly helpful and helped give Paris a basic sense of space. So we play with that all the time too. And so hopefully I've gotten across how the systems and mechanics of the game are shallow. All these things sit alongside each other. They don't really stack on each other, but they're broad. There aren't many exceptions to these rules. So if you know a rule, you can almost always rely on it being consistent. And the system parts feed into each other very elegantly. And as you get to working with them, you can see where there's depth and room to strategize. You can add to and adapt the system very easily, as long as you don't overcomplicate things and add that depth I mentioned. And the game still runs fast and clean. There's no complicated rules to adjudicate and arguments to get in over. What's on the chart is on the chart. And if you make additions or alterations to the game, you need to have the consensus of the table. Some of the modifications we've done is, while in the book there are rules for investments, it's a very basic system, but my friend Pat came up with this very sophisticated business investment rule system that still involves the chance to lose your shirt as well as to gain a lot of money. It's another venue for status points, and depending on what you're investing in, can give you different amounts. They can also net you influence, because if you got money around, then people listen to you. While the investment rules in the book aren't bad, I think this one's better. But we kept it simple and modular so we could just tack it right onto the system. We're good to go. I came up with a different setting in Ottoman Constantinople, so the mistresses work differently. You can play as a foreign mercenary or as a native Turk, and there's different rules for both. The regiments are renamed, and there's different foreign countries you can get into conflict with. And also, you don't go carousing at bars, you go to tea houses and make friends that way. And because the mistresses lose a lot of their status point generating capability, instead, I added in imams who, because they're religious authorities, and if you patronize them, then that gives you some of the reflected glory attached to that cleric. It's a really cool system. We also came up with a monthly random occurrence chart, where when you come to a new month, you roll a d6 on a 1. That means something special is going to happen that month. You might have a public parade going on where you have opportunities to earn status points in exchange for participation. There might be a fencing contest. That expertise score you rolled can go up the more duels you win and the more time you spend at the fencing academy. And here's a place where you can get more practice, prestige, and maybe appointment to a position in the fencing academy as the instructor or the headmaster. There might be a riot in Paris where everybody in every regiment has to get called in to help put it down, and you get to use the same war rules as you do on campaign. And there's a chance for adventure, where you and the other guys at the table make some crap up, involve a few skill challenges, involve the risk of death, and if you make it to the end, you win certain prizes as you all pick. And when me and Pat played this at TotalCon, we rolled up an adventure where our two guys got sent to escort a dignitary to Vienna. And on the way, we got jumped by would-be assassins. I got my ass kicked. Pat drove them off, and I was laid up in bed in Vienna recovering for the next month. Well, because of our die rolls, we managed to get some mentions out of it, and we got honored by the Austrian emperor. And since I was a major that had brought along my own battalion as the escort, once we were done, I decided we were going to fight our way back to France by invading Germany from the rear. And I'll be damned, we rolled hot. So there was duels along the way, there was diplomacy that happened, and then more adventuring opportunity. It was a lot of fun. When Pat and I playtested the Ottoman Empire setting, we had to foil an assassin against the Sultan. And we did such a good job, he knighted us at the end of it. You could adapt this to other settings. Pat wants to make a Wild West version of it. You can adapt entire games to it so you can have a DM-less system for running the game. I've got rules where you could play the Vampire the Masquerade game using this automated system. It's badass. And so everybody can play. Nobody has to step back and be the storyteller. Everybody can be players. Pat came up with a system for bounty hunting. I came up with an NPC rival system because if it's just me and Pat playing, we don't want to fight each other that much and engender the acrimony that'll make us not want to do it. But when you make your character, you generate an NPC rival who every week you have a chance of running into, and then it's dueling time or shame time. It's up to you. And you have a permanent enemy that's going to go for the same positions and the same mistresses as you. It builds conflict into the game. And because it's not overly complicated, it runs smooth. Pat even came up with a new regiment, the Navy, which why isn't there an option for the Navy? And there's disasters that can happen while you're out at sea. He implemented into the system. So for our new character in his very first month, I'd recommend first week you go to the body house, dip your wick and get some drinks. Second week, you go join a club, the best one that'll let you in. Third week, go land yourself a mistress if you can. And fourth week, go join a regiment. And then after that, if you've got your house set up right, you can move to go up in one of those areas, go on campaign, or other options. Just depends on what you and your friends want to do. Now for my criticisms of the game as written, because it isn't perfect. Now I started off the video talking about how dueling is important to the game, but I haven't talked about the dueling system yet. Well, why not? Because it's awful, unless you enjoy lethal guessing games. Just look at these pages. This is a system only wargamers could love. While it is true the game started with this guessing game dueling system, and the rest of it was built up around that dueling system to add flavor to the fights, it sucks. Having played it, I hate it. I prefer dice to rule my combats and not overly complicated games of paper, rock, scissors. A game very much inspired by On Guard, by the name of Flashing Blades, refined this system quite a bit, and in my one experience with it at Jerry Stratton's con session, I really liked it, but not this version. I much prefer the Steve Winter method of rolling a d6, applying expertise modifiers to gamify the combats with chance. I like it, and it's the version I use. Each duelist gets a d6. If one has significantly higher expertise than the other, they get bonuses. If they're equally matched, it's even odds. And my friends and I came up with a variety of fighting styles that you can learn at the Fencing Academy that add additional flavor and interest and ways you can do this in-game, and it can work really well. And here's the chart that I came up with, just to show you what all we account for and what the results are. The rule book is approximately 80 pages of text. Unfortunately, there's a lot of blank space that's clearly for padding. While easy enough to follow for the most part, and with some useful examples, it reads to me like it leaves some things undefined when the plain meaning is not obvious. It hides little details important to one section of the book and another, and it doesn't address some fairly important topics. For example, when on campaign, do PCs roll battle result outcomes every month or once per season? It doesn't say. When you volunteer for military deployment out of summer campaign season, you have to volunteer with the Frontier Regiment. So if you take your battalion, your regiment, or brigade, do you use your modifiers or the Frontier Regiment's modifiers? It doesn't say. For appointments players can get, some are defined and are incredibly amusing, but some are not defined, but probably should be because they appear to have important features, like the Brigade Major. Brigade Major comes up in a few locations throughout the text, but it's never really defined as to what it is and does. Information on mistresses and how they work are spread 16 pages apart. The fact that Paul Evans has a 31-page home rule supplement he uses for his own games speaks to the need for improvement and clarification. For a game set in Paris, France, there's an awful lot of English place names and titles in here, which seems weird. Why is the highest status club called Bothwell's instead of, say, the Fleur de Lis? Why are there earls in the noble title list? Why is the special forces unit that you can join called the Royal North Highlanders? That sounds like something very useful if you're British and you're recruiting a bunch of Scots, but who are these Highlanders? Burgundians? That would be Eastern or Southern Highlanders. What the hell is this? Certain NPCs have a social level, but what is that social level? Like the Crown Prince, the Cardinal, and the King, you can interact with them, but we have no idea what their social levels are. And this could be important because if NPCs hold certain of those higher appointment positions, it would be good to know if player characters have gotten too far up the social ladder and could be viewed as threats, and so the NPCs might start targeting them for preventative action. And there's a bunch of games that have been at least influenced by On Guard, like the aforementioned Flashing Blades, but there's more, including this most curious one I had never heard of, but the wife found for me, Madame Guillotine by Fantasy Games Unlimited. While I haven't had a chance to play this yet, in looking at it, it kind of seems like an appropriate successor to On Guard, because while On Guard is set in Royal Paris, Madame Guillotine is set in the Reign of Terror Paris, where all those royalists and dissenters against the state and just political enemies are getting guillotined by the clique in power. And this game is set up similarly to On Guard in a lot of ways, but the focus isn't on personal aggrandizement and social climbing. It's trying to get all the other players guillotined before they get you guillotined. So I guess if you play On Guard for too long, you eventually should start a game of Madame Guillotine. And while I haven't played this one a lot, I have played it some, and I can't help but think that Pendragon borrowed a lot from On Guard. As I was playing this Arthurian role-playing game, the way that it's broken up into seasons instead of weeks, and that you have a finite amount of things that you can do in a given season, and you need to plan ahead for what it is you're going to be doing. And that combat was an important part of the game, but so were a whole lot of social activities that you could engage in. It felt like a souped-up On Guard to me. And considering that Pendragon came out in 1985, 10 years after On Guard, there was plenty of opportunity for lessons to be learned from that earlier game. I do want to point out Pendragon is excellent, so I would recommend it. Now, where do you buy On Guard? Well, you can buy it directly from the website, onguard.co.uk, where they can send you a physical copy as well as sell the PDF. Amazon has the physical copies for sale, and that's where I got mine from. I didn't see it available on DriveThruRPG, so you can't go there, unlike with most of the other things that I talk about. To get different perspectives on this game, the other reviews generally weren't that great or very insightful to me. Except for one. The best one that I encountered was from Jeffrey MacArthur, and he's actually linked on the On Guard website, so I'd recommend you check that one out on YouTube. But there's a bunch of little reviews of the game out there, but I don't get the sense from them that the people who were doing the reviews really understood the material, and so weren't able to give that good of an opinion. Like, a lot of them didn't get a bunch of aspects of the game. But if you'd like to try it out, well, you can reach out to Paul Evans and join his play-by-email game, and every few months something will happen, or send me a message because you might be able to join me and Pat in our roughly monthly game where we play for 2 to 3 hours and have thrilling experiences along the way. We're both very happy to teach, so you won't be an imposition. We'll be glad to see you there. We love this game. We've been playing it together for years, and we want more players to enjoy it. So have you played On Guard before? What'd you think? What'd you think of this review? Was there stuff that I missed? Well, let me know in the comments below. I'd like to hear about it. And if you enjoyed this, I do enjoy when people like and subscribe, so help a brother out. And I thank you for your time, and that you chose to spend it with me and On Guard. And so, my dear friends, as we part for now, I wish you nothing but the best.